Passionate Marriage by David Schnarch is a book about how long-term love, emotional closeness, and sexual desire actually work inside real marriages. The book challenges many comforting myths about relationships, especially the idea that intimacy comes from constant reassurance, emotional merging, or always making each other feel good. Schnarch argues that deep connection and lasting passion do not grow from trying to avoid discomfort, but from learning how to tolerate it, face oneself honestly, and remain emotionally present even when things are difficult. At its core, the book says that the strongest marriages are not built on perfect harmony, but on two people who are willing to grow up emotionally while staying connected. The book begins by explaining why so many marriages struggle with sex, desire, and closeness even when the partners love each other and genuinely want things to be better. Schnarch introduces the idea that modern marriage asks more of couples than ever before. In the past, marriage was mostly about survival, shared labor, and raising children. Emotional fulfillment and personal growth were not expected from one spouse. Today, people expect their marriage to provide love, friendship, emotional safety, validation, sexual fulfillment, and a sense of meaning. This creates pressure that many couples are not emotionally prepared to handle. When marriage becomes the main place where people seek a sense of self-worth, it can easily become fragile and tense. A key idea in passionate marriage is differentiation, which means the ability to stay emotionally connected to another person while still being a clear, solid individual. Differentiation is not about being distant or selfish. It is about being able to know what you think, feel, and want without demanding that your partner agree, change, or fix your feelings. Poorly differentiated people depend heavily on their partner's reactions to feel okay inside. They may need constant reassurance, approval, or emotional harmony. When they do not get it, they feel anxious, rejected, or angry. In marriage, this leads to patterns where both partners manage each other's emotions instead of managing themselves. Schnarch explains that many couples confuse emotional fusion with intimacy. Emotional fusion happens when partners become overly focused on keeping each other comfortable and calm. They avoid conflict, hide parts of themselves, and shape their behavior around their partner's reactions. This may feel loving at first, but over time it weakens desire and respect. Sexual passion especially suffers in fused relationships because erotic desire depends on a sense of separateness. It is hard to want someone sexually when you feel emotionally merged, needy, or responsible for their emotional state. The book introduces the idea of emotional gridlock, which describes the stuck, painful patterns that couples repeat again and again. These patterns often revolve around issues like sex, money, power, or emotional closeness. Each partner feels trapped, misunderstood, and frustrated. They may blame each other, withdraw, argue endlessly, or shut down emotionally. Schnarch says that gridlock is not a sign that the marriage is broken. Instead, it is a sign that the marriage is pushing both people to grow. Gridlock exposes the limits of emotional maturity and forces partners to confront parts of themselves they would rather avoid. One of the most challenging ideas in passionate marriage is that partners cannot fix each other's discomfort without damaging the relationship. When one person changes themselves just to reduce their partner's anxiety, resentment slowly builds. When someone pressures their partner to change so they can feel better, intimacy erodes. Schnarch argues that each partner must learn to tolerate their own emotional discomfort instead of handing it to the other person. This includes tolerating fear, shame, anger, loneliness, and sexual insecurity without demanding immediate relief. The book places strong emphasis on sexual desire and the problems couples have around mismatched libido. Schnarch challenges the idea that desire differences are mainly about hormones, attraction, or technique. He suggests that desire problems often reflect emotional development. Low desire can be a way of avoiding vulnerability, pressure, or emotional exposure. High desire sometimes reflects a need for reassurance or validation rather than pure erotic interest. Instead of trying to negotiate desire through compromise or persuasion, Schnarch encourages partners to focus on becoming more solid in themselves, which often changes desire naturally. Schnarch also talks about normal marital sadism, a provocative term he uses to describe the subtle ways partners hurt each other by refusing to grow. This includes withholding affection, avoiding responsibility, playing victim, or using moral superiority to control the relationship. These behaviors are usually unconscious and rooted in fear, not cruelty. However, they still damage trust and sexual connection. The book emphasizes that facing these patterns requires honesty and self-confrontation rather than blame. Another major theme in the book is self-soothing, which means the ability to calm oneself emotionally without relying on someone else to do it. Schnarch believes this skill is essential for mature intimacy. When people cannot self-soothe, they use sex, affection, arguments, or withdrawal to regulate their emotions. This creates pressure in the relationship and makes sex feel like a duty, a bargaining chip, or a source of anxiety. Learning to self-soothe allows partners to choose closeness rather than demand it. The book also discusses the importance of integrity in marriage. Integrity means living according to one's values even when it causes tension or disappointment. Schnarch argues that many people lose sexual desire because they lose respect for themselves. They avoid conflict, silence their truth, or agree to things that go against their values in order to keep peace. Over time, this self-betrayal kills erotic energy. Passion grows when people are willing to stand on their own feet emotionally and live honestly even when it risks conflict. Schnarch presents the idea that sex is not just about pleasure, but about personal growth. Sexual encounters often bring up deep fears about rejection, worth, attractiveness, and control. Instead of avoiding these feelings, Schnarch encourages couples to see sex as a place where they can practice staying present, honest, and emotionally grounded. This approach shifts sex from being performance-focused to being connection-focused, without turning it into emotional caretaking. Throughout the book, Schnarch uses clinical stories and examples from real couples to show how these ideas play out in daily life. These stories illustrate how partners often try to change each other, fix the relationship, or find the right technique, while avoiding the harder work of changing themselves. The couples who grow are the ones who stop chasing comfort and start tolerating growth. They learn to speak honestly, listen without collapsing or attacking, and stay emotionally present even when the conversation is uncomfortable. The book also challenges the idea that good relationships should feel easy. Schnarch argues that meaningful intimacy often feels difficult because it pushes people beyond their emotional comfort zones. Growth in marriage requires facing old wounds, family patterns, and fears that have been present since childhood. Marriage becomes a kind of emotional gym where partners are constantly invited to develop more strength, clarity, and courage. As the book moves towards its later themes, it emphasizes that passion is not something couples create by trying harder to please each other. Passion emerges when two people are fully present, emotionally grounded, and willing to be seen as they truly are. Desire grows when partners stop trying to manage each other's feelings and start taking responsibility for themselves. This kind of passion is quieter, deeper, and more stable than the intense excitement of early romance, but it is also more satisfying and resilient. The book closes by reinforcing the idea that marriage is not meant to make people comfortable, but to help them grow. Schnarch doesn't promise an easy or painless path. Instead, he offers a realistic and demanding vision of love that values honesty, courage, and self-respect. Passionate marriage suggests that the strongest relationships are built by two people who are willing to face themselves, stand alone when necessary, and stay connected without losing who they are. In doing so, they create a marriage that is not only loving and sexual, but deeply alive.